ये त्वक्षरमनिर्देश्यम् अव्यक्तं पर्युपासते सर्वत्र गमचिन्त्यं च कूटस्थमचलं ध्रुवम् सन्नियम्येन्द्रियग्रामम् सर्वत्र समबुद्धयः ते प्राप्नुवन्ति मामेव सर्वभूतहिते रताः.
So, whereas in verse 2 he says, those who worship form are the best, here he supports the formless worshippers. So he says, but those who worship the imperishable, inexplicable, unmanifest, the all-pervading, the inconceivable, the unchanging, the immovable, and the eternal, they also come to me, having controlled all the senses, even-minded everywhere, engaged in the welfare of all beings. So, verse 3, if you read it, is incomplete because the unmanifest cannot be captured with the intellect. All these, the words that he uses are only indicators, they're pointers. Just as if you are to locate an unknown point X, if that unknown point X, there are no indicators, it's an unknown entity, but then pointers are given. So the question that comes to you is, that unknown point X is 6 inches from A, 2 inches from B, 8 inches from C. What do? You take a compass and draw arcs. And when you draw these arcs, you don't even need 3 pointers, you need 2. You know A, you know B, you know C. From A, B and C you draw arcs, you've got the unknown point X. Similarly, God is an unknown entity. And if you want to contact God, if you want to locate God, if you want to capture God, since that is something that cannot be captured with the intellect, you can only take pointers. And once you use all these pointers, you get to a stage where you haven't reached that yet. But then you take a mighty leap forward from there and you got it. So these pointers are like what they call as Chandra Shakha Nyaya. There's a beautiful terminology, beautiful method that they have explained in the Shastras, in the scriptures, which is, if in daylight, sometimes you see a crescent moon up there in the sky, you see it and you want to point it out to your friend, you suddenly say, oh, look at the beautiful crescent moon in the sky. And your friend says, where? Now it's a cloudless sky. There's nothing against which you can point out the crescent moon. So what do? You say, look out there in the open field, in the Maidan. That is known. So the friend says, all right, I've got that. Do you see that one tree in the corner there? And she says, yes, I see the tree. You go up the trunk of the tree, and the second branch on the right, go to the end of it. There's a twig that's going up. So your friend is following every instruction of yours. And then you say, at the end of that twig, there are 2 leaves fluttering in the breeze. Do you see that? And your friend says, yes. Now, having got to that stage, suddenly you say, now, look between the 2 leaves. Oh, yeah, I see the moon. As long as your friend goes from the Maidan to the tree, to the trunk, the branch, the twig, the leaves, and remains at the leaves, the friend will never see the crescent moon. After the 2 leaves, he has to take that mighty leap forward beyond the 2 leaves, and only then sees the crescent moon. Now, what is the connection between the tree, the trunk, the branch, the leaves, and the moon? No connection whatsoever. And yet, minus all these pointers, you will never be able to reach the crescent moon. Isn't that true? Similarly, all this akshara, anirdesham, avyaktam, sarvatra, achintya, so on and so forth, they are only words. Words are finite. Words are captured by the intellect. But that which you are trying to see is beyond the intellect, which cannot be conceived by the intellect. And so, therefore, you might say, of what use is all this? Yet, it is very, very useful. Without these pointers, you can't get there. But if you get stuck to the pointers, you will never get there. This is what it is. Akshara, imperishable. You look around you in the world, everything perishes. Especially that which you have lent your heart to, that which you have sold your soul to. Anything that you are depending on in the world somehow leaves you. And it leaves you wretched, grieving, sorrowful. So the happiness that you're looking for, whatever it is that you're looking for, is that which will remain with you throughout. Isn't that what you're looking for? Whether in a spouse or a friend or whatever it is. But the world perishes. Every aspect in the world perishes. So that which is imperishable. It's like the waves in the ocean perish. They must necessarily perish. A wave is born, lives for a while and dies. But the ocean never perishes. Ornaments perish. The gold element with which the ornaments are made never perishes. So the world perishes, but the substratum, that which is beyond the world, which supports the world, never perishes. Anirdesham, inexplicable, indefinable. Language can define something which has 6 characteristics. Guna, property. Kriya, work done. Karma, action. Nama, name. Vishesha, quality. And Sambandha, relationship. But Atman has none of these, and therefore language cannot define. Language completely breaks down when trying to communicate the spirit. Avyaktam, it's unmanifest. Atman pervades the waking dream and deep sleep states and exists beyond. Has it ever occurred to you that we go through these 3 states? We are awake now. If I continue for another half an hour, at least half of you will be fast asleep. And from the deep sleep, some of you might dream. But what is interesting is when you are in any given state, now that you are awake, you have no access to your own dream or deep sleep state. And when you are dreaming, however real the waking state may seem now, you have no access to that. Has it ever occurred to you, is there a possibility of being aware of all the 3 states at the same time? Again, as Shankaracharya says, Yat swapna jagara sushuptam aveti nityam. That which is constantly aware of the 3 states of consciousness. So, sarvatraga, it exists everywhere. There is no place where it does not exist. Achintyam, it is that power that enables the intellect to conceive various things of the world, and therefore with the intellect you cannot conceive that. Just as with the light of a torch you can illumine everything except the batteries. If you want to see what make the batteries are, you pull out the battery, the light is gone, you can't see. Achintyam. Kutastha. Kutastha, it's the unchanging factor, the anvil on that constant factor that's with you all the time. And that is I. You say, I am, I see, I feel, I touch. I am happy, I am unhappy. Whatever be your experiences, the experience is constantly changing. The I remains. That I is the real you. That I is Atman. But the moment you say I, you condition it by the use of something. You say, I am happy, I am unhappy, I am touching, I am tasting, I am seeing, and then you mess it all up. Anybody at any time who's able to just remain with that I, unconditioned I, has got it. Kutastha. And then comes achalam, immovable. Movement is possible from a place where you exist to a place where you do not exist. Since there is, like for instance, you can move from your seat to a vacant seat. But Atman exists everywhere. There is no place where Atman does not exist. Therefore, there is no possibility of movement. Dhruvam, eternal, that which supports the world in the past, present and future, all periods of time, is Atman. Now these are pointers, these are meant for contemplation, these are meant for meditation, not explanation. So having said this, Krishna must have sensed, like he is sensing now, that we are all getting phased out a bit. So see, these are tough concepts. So immediately he comes down to our level and he says in verse 4, what he is talking about is the practices that you need to pursue in order to get to that state of meditation, which are, number 1, Sanniyamya Indriya Gramam, one who has controlled all senses. This is the starting point of spiritual life, this is the end of spiritual life. And yet we find that none of us seem to be able to control the senses. Control does not mean denial. Denial is something that is very easy. What is difficult is not denial, but the right amount of contact. For instance, you eat, you see, you do whatever it is that you have to do in the world. The only difference is that instead of the sense object calling the shots, you retain mastery over the contact. In other words, whenever you sit down to eat, the question that should arise in your mind is, do you decide how much food to eat, or does the food decide how much of you to have? The moment you start eating, the mastery is gone. It's like, those who have dogs. They say they are taking the dog out for a walk, but there's a factual error there. It is the dog who's taking them for a walk. But a disciplined dog, a well-trained dog is one where there is a quiet command given by the owner and there is implicit obedience. This is the level of control that we should strive for. This is what he's talking about. At the emotional level, this is a beautiful concept. Sarva bhuta hite rataha. The capacity to enjoy the triumphs of other people, including your enemies, your opponents, your competitors. And unfortunately, we've reached a stage where we can't enjoy the achievements of our own people, never mind opponents and enemies. If your neighbor's child gets a high grade in university exams, and you get so excited, you buy sweets, you distribute the sweets, and you go telling the whole world, oh, this guy has done extremely well. This is called Sarva Bhuta Hite Rata. Why should your happiness be restricted to only when your son does well? Then your son will never do well. That's a fact. You have to be able to find happiness in the happiness of all beings. And that's a wonderful concept. If you don't have that, there's something fundamentally wrong with it. This is emotional, and the intellectual is again a fabulous concept. Sarvatra samabuddhaya. even-minded everywhere, to maintain this constancy irrespective of what happens around you in the world. Because fundamentally the world consists of pairs of opposites. You can't change that. You can't help it. But a sensible human being is one who learns to ride the ups and downs. Isn't that true? As the saying goes, there is no such thing as bad weather, there is only improper clothing. So in winter, if you are wearing summer clothes, and in summer you are wearing winter clothes, and then you complain, whose fault is it? Similarly, the world is full of pairs of opposites. All that you have to do is, just as on roads that are badly maintained, potholed roads, if you go in an auto rickshaw, you feel your lungs and kidneys and everything going upside down. But on the same road, you go in a luxury car, what happens? You don't feel the bumps. So what's the difference? The difference is shock absorbers. You need to cultivate inner shock absorbers and then live life. Go riding over the ups and downs of life, which are, it'll be hot outside, it'll be cold outside. There will be profit, there will be loss. There will be birth, there will be death, there will be honor, dishonor. And all these wonderful pairs of opposites, which were earlier traumatizing you. Now, you enjoy them. You enjoy them as Leela. Leela, that's what Krishna did. Look at Krishna's life. He faced challenges right through. From the time he was born till the end, he was constantly facing challenges. But there's a world of difference between his life and ours. He went through life with a smile on his face, cheerful, dynamic, energetic. Nothing phased him out, nothing depressed him. Well, you and I, if we don't have a challenge, you imagine a challenge and suffer. So you ask people, how's life with you? Oh, life is great. Only thing is, I think stock market will go down, therefore I'm feeling down. Or exams are coming, I don't know how my child will do. Yeah. Why do you want to meet misfortune halfway? In fact, you meet misfortune all the way. So, this is it. The 3 disciplines if you follow. Number 1, control the senses. Number 2, emotionally, sarva bhuta hite rataha. Learn to enjoy the achievements of others as if they were your own. And number 3, sarvatra samabuddhaya, even-minded in the best and the worst of circumstances, you maintain an equanimity of mind. Then what will happen? Te prapnuvanti mameva. They also reach me. You will reach that state of enlightenment. So, what are you taking home with you? Number 1, that the Bhagavad Gita teaches us to fight the challenges of life, and therefore it's not a book to be worshipped, it is a book to be learnt, practiced, implemented, lived. And therefore, expose this to young people. So, number 1, the Bhagavad Gita is about the inner battle. Number 2, that there are 2 paths, the path of the pleasant, preyaha, and the path of the good, shreya. Then we saw the stages of growth. The 4 stages of growth are sense contact, pleasure. 2nd, success. 3rd, duty. And 4th, self-discovery. Excellent. And that the Gita tells us, Tattvamasi, you are God. Form and formless worship. And the last thing which you should never forget is the 3 spiritual disciplines: sense control, sarva bhutaite rataha, enjoy other people's achievements, and number 3, even-minded everywhere.